Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Welcome to episode number 2. Welcome back to Two Hearts, One Bitcoin. We didn't even say the name of the podcast in the first the first 15 minutes of this. By the way, guys and gals, we tried the first 15 minutes. Nope, we restarted again.
I got really hot. I got really nervous.
Welcome back,
and
everybody.
I pressed stop. Episode 2.
It's the best part. You can push stop
You're the
anytime
owner of
you
our
want
destiny.
to on your path. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. How did the launch of the episode go? Episode 1.
Guys, you're really on board. That was really exciting.
Absolutely floored. And so appreciative, by the way. Genuinely. Conservatively, I think we knew friends and family would listen in and watch. But just the reach of the first episode was bananas. Like, people both of us haven't spoken with in a long time reached out. And more than that, it wasn't just about like, hey, congrats on this project that you're working on. The fact that like people actually sat down, took an hour of their time and listened to a full episode.
I honestly can't believe it.
What?
I can't believe it.
Thanks. That's huge.
Was a huge compliment. And thank you for everyone who did comment and send me messages and us
we
messages.
appreciate it. I don't know. It feels like it's like, okay, we got a little bit of traction, at least for episode 2.
Yeah, it made us excited to jump right in and not waste any time. And,
Yeah. So today, we thought about this. We've been thinking about this for a full week, to be honest. But like, what the heck do we focus on for episode number 2?
Yeah.
And wanting to build on episode number 1, one of the pieces we left you all with was just that phrase that Bitcoin is the best form of money that probably has ever existed. In my humble opinion,
Big
is
statement.
the best form that
Yes.
has ever existed, right?
Yes.
So yes, do we want to get into all the mechanics of Bitcoin and like what is mining and all those things? We absolutely do. But it would be a disservice to go that far without just explaining what is good money. And I feel like that's really like our goal for the next, 45 minutes, hour, 2 hour, who knows how long it'll take. As part of that journey, we will do what is good money. That's going to be for sure one of the starting points. It would be a bit silly to not talk about where money comes from, or at least who influences money. So we'll go into the Federal Reserve. We'll do that. And then we'll kind of cap off with where Bitcoin kind of comes into all this, kind of offering a solution to the problems that we're about to unpack. We will try to be as jovial as possible when unpacking this as well.
Yeah.
But that's the goal. Yeah?
Love it.
Okay, also, side story, have to mention this. Also, fun plug. Gosh, I hope we get to meet some of these people someday. But as we were building towards this episode, new book, Nate by Lawrence Lepard, Larry Lepard, The Big Print, relatively new. I have been so looking forward to this book. Larry's been talking about it on Twitter and on various podcasts, and it just launched. And it's great. It's I haven't finished it yet, but I think it really sets up the problem prior to the solution.
I'll give my I promised honesty and transparency on this podcast. Here's my honest review. I started reading it today at the car wash when we were preparing for episode 2. And I only read 22 pages. And I said, Jesus Christ, at least 8 times.
17 times.
Jesus Christ. Oh,
we were
Jesus
drawing
Christ.
attention to ourselves.
And Taylor looked at me. He goes, you're saying that out loud, right? And I was like, well, yes. But there are a lot of, what do they call them? Truth bombs in the first 22 pages. But wow, the statistics were really insightful and kind of wild. So
I hope to do Larry even just a little bit of justice.
Larry, we're on your team.
Larry, God, just know we're
on the same
we really
side.
are.
Love what
so
you're doing.
With that, I don't know. We'll put a link somewhere to check out The Big Print, but it's phenomenal thus far. But jumping right into it.
Yes.
What is good money?
What is good money? To be honest, I didn't know there was a difference between good money and bad money. I just thought it was money.
Okay, and this is fair because most of us humans were walking around swiping credit cards, buying coffee, going to the grocery store, doing those things. I don't know that many people really sit and think about the quality of money very often.
No.
We didn't before this topic. So
No.
like, why would you, right? It just works.
Honestly, the quality, I feel like when you say quality of money, I mean, I'm a visual thinker. So a lot of
Sure.
times you'll say something and I'll just have like either a memory flash. honest to God, you said quality of money. And I thought, how crisp are the dollar bills? How new are the coins? What year
Fair.
were they made?
Get
I
it.
mean, when I think quality of money, I think that's the only thing I would think of right off the bat before these
I think that makes
conversations of
sense.
like, was it clean? Has it been through like 48 laundry machines and now is in my wallet?
Probably
That's
many.
not what we're talking about. It's
No.
different than that.
And also, gosh, there's so many episodes in the future. This is not going to probably be the depth we need to, but let's just go high level. There have been lots of forms of money used throughout mankind. There have been.
You know what? You know what we want to introduce.
Where are we
this
starting?
with?
What are we starting with?
Some of you really liked the words stones of yap.
Stones of Yap.
I'll give you a quick.
What's the quick and dirty on the Stones
Two-sentence-
of Yap?
They were gigantic stones. To be honest, they actually were between an inch wide and 12 feet wide. Thousands of pounds. But back
Makes
in
total
the
sense.
early, they say early as 500 AD, but they say more commonly used in the 1000 to 1400 AD. Giant stones the Japanese people would use.
Japanese?
Japanese.
That's amazing.
I know. They look like giant donuts, but, and this will make sense later on, they were kind of the first currency that leveraged ledgers. So it was really fascinating because they look pretty cool, actually. The pictures are pretty cool if you look them up. But
Can we like flash a photo of the Stones of
maybe
Yap?
in the corner?
Flash? No, just like the whole right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
The whole screen. If you're watching this
Super
on
cool.
YouTube, the whole thing just became the
Anyway,
image of the
super
Stones
fascinating.
of Yap.
But literally, they had these gigantic stones, and we're going to go into what some attributes of what makes good money good money. One of these things, portability, is one of those, which we will list. They weren't very portable, so the Japanese people, as a collection, agreed that there was an oral history, an oral ledger, that though the stone existed, it didn't move. It didn't change hands. So let's say they had one stone in the village and someone said, this stone now belongs to so-and-so. Well,
Bob's
as
stone.
long as everybody agreed to put it in the ledger, it was in the ledger. They even said that one of the stones in transit fell to the bottom of the ocean, but the consensus agreed that it still existed. And even though it wasn't in the village, it existed somewhere. And they said that still counts. So it's a really fascinating early history into consensus ledgers.
Interesting. Do you think
There
we
you
could
go.
get a Stone of Yap like statue in our yard or something, just as an homage
my
to
God.
money? That would
We
be
need to put
great.
it on this. My
Yeah.
eye line. Anyway, there you
Stones
go.
of Yap.
For those of you, someone asked me to mention it. So
It's a real thing. But long story
early
short,
form of currency.
I'm gonna say Bob,
Yeah.
one of the first Yap individuals. I'm making this up. Like, why? Why were the stones even necessary? And I think this is where the mechanics of money, it as a technology, really starts to like be like, oh yeah, like this is pretty important to our society and the way it works. And in the simplest form possible, when you as an individual worked your butt off, and let's say you grew apples. And you're like, great, I have all these apples. This is wonderful. I just worked so hard. I put a ton of time and energy into making these apples. But guess what? Can't live just on apples. You need a roof over your head. You need, I don't know, cloth for clothing, right? There's like, you need tools, all sorts of other things to make the apples. So how the heck do you exchange your apples for all of those things? And so sure, you might have a neighbor or a buddy that has cloth or, I don't know, stuff to make houses with. And yes, you could probably get to a point where you're exchanging apples for whatever those things are.
Bartering.
If you will. Thank you. But at some point, you do reach a bit of a pinnacle where either it's just getting awkward and frankly inefficient to like try and figure out what's the exchange rate of apples to leather and apples to clothing, like right, all these different things. And so this is where money itself really starts to play a role. It's this medium in betwixt everything that everybody agrees on and says, yes, this thing has value. So you can exchange some of your apples for money and then hold on to that money. And then when you need to exchange it for, again, cloth, clothing, whatever it is, like you can. Novel idea. But the reason, again, I think why it's so important for us to cover this, I really can't state enough the significance and importance of this technology in driving life, in driving modern society. Like in the absence of this, the world as you know it does not happen.
Yeah.
That's the importance of this object. You need a medium of exchange in order to go back to growing more apples, to grow your apple business, to do different things.
Yeah.
Can't happen without. And so over history, there have been so many different forms of money, right? You've had stones of yap,
Shells.
seashells, salt, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I'm not going to quote the years, but at some point, I feel like precious metals, specifically gold and silver, start to play a pretty big role. So I'm going to pause right now for a moment because we're going to throw some terms at you. I'm not going to go into depth on all the terms, but if you were to Google or perhaps leverage ChatGPT, as maybe I did in prep for this episode, of qualities of good money or qualities of sound money. Here's would be some of those qualities that the money itself would need to have.
Yeah.
Number one, durability. Money should last over a period of time. It's a bummer if for those who used salt way back when and it rained, that's a bummer because now your money is disappearing in front of you.
Yeah.
Portability has to be easy to transport. That makes sense. What if you want to take, I don't know, your Apple Biz across the world, across the states? Like, right? It's a bummer if you can't bring your money with you. Huge win,
Yeah.
making your money portable. Divisibility, got to be able to break it down into smaller pieces. Fungibility, it's a super fun word. We're not going to get cut up on it. It really just means that one unit has to be equal to another. So if I pulled out a dollar bill out of my wallet
Yeah.
and you pulled out a dollar bill in your wallet, $1, it means that they're exchangeable for one another, right?
Got it.
They're indistinguishable and easily exchanged. Whereas, let's say our house and your parents' house, those are assets, but they're not fungible because they don't have the same value. We can't exchange houses.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
And then two more things.
Yep.
Scarcity. This is arguably one of the most important ones. We'll come back to it, but money should be hard to create more of.
Yep.
And then finally, acceptability. People must widely trust and want to use it. If you walk into Starbucks on Monday morning trying to buy your first cup of coffee and you walk in with a big bunch of apples that are worth $3, no offense to you, but Starbucks doesn't want your apples. So not really a good form of money in that regard.
I think if you take a second,
Take a
breathe,
breath.
and take in those terms, I'm going to read them slowly one more time.
Do it.
Durability, portability, divisibility, fungibility, scarcity, and acceptability. Take those in. You really see how those, 6 terms have affected the evolution of currency.
100%
Like,
over a period of time.
If
You're
you
right.
boil it down, those categories, you really see how exactly, like, you're not going to let's say, even take gold. You kind of see how, if you found a ton of gold, it's really heavy. Your horses are going to get tired.
Right.
So you see, how then they're like, okay, bank, keep this gold for me here because I can't move it very easily.
Right.
Well, how do I know I have that gold? Well, we'll give you a piece of paper that says you have this gold in this bank. You just start to see how the challenges in each of one of those categories has really shaped where we've gotten to today.
And what is the best money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what is I was gonna say the most durable, but that's one of the terms. So I like that list.
Okay. I so love that you brought this up. So again, lots of different forms of money have been used. Before we skip from this section,
Yeah.
I think gold. Say it out loud. Everyone at least has a cognitive understanding of what gold is, even
Yeah.
if they've never held gold, touched gold, smelt gold, whatever it is. They kind of know, like, this is a highly valuable thing.
I was just gonna say, I think your first instinct is go. That's valuable.
That's valuable, 100%. And that's my filler word, by the way, for this podcast episode. I'm not going to say 100% anymore on this thing.
Mine was last time I said I would say.
So let's think for a second.
Delete.
Gold, to your point.
Yes.
Go back in the various books that we're going to recommend over this podcast. Gold's going to be talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And it played a huge role in shaping good money. Number one, durability. Money should last over a period of time. Gold is extremely durable. And I mean, not to say that it can't be destroyed. Like, yeah, if you, I guess, throw a stick of dynamite at a bar of gold, like
Yeah.
some bad stuff might happen, but
Yeah.
pretty darn durable
I agree.
comparatively to, again, other forms of media, other forms of money that came before gold.
Yep.
Portability. This got better over a period of time with gold coins. Right?
Yep.
That was like one of them. That made it a little bit easier. Divisibility. Same thing. Break down a bar into a coup grand, into
Ounces.
gold, into ounces.
Yep.
Fungibility, right? One unit should equal another. Yes, same thing with coins. Like one gold coin equals another gold coin. Or if, to your point, 1 ounce of gold equals 1 ounce of gold.
Yeah.
Scarcity. It's really hard to mine a bunch of gold and pull it out of the ground.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't know.
It's still hard.
It's still
it was
freaking
hard
hard.
then, and it's still hard now.
It's one of those things. And acceptability. Even though I like to imagine most of us prefer, at least at this moment in time, U.S. dollars for payment of services or our salary, things like that. Pretty sure if someone offered you a gold bar, you'd take it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not saying no to that kind of thing,
Yeah.
but from
I
acceptability.
mean, I like to picture
acceptability.
the times where gold was the accepted. I mean, we all have the movies in our head where,
Yeah.
I mean, everyone just goes pirates, but
Not a bad thing. So we're going to pause there on gold. Then at some point, again, years ago, we then migrate to this thing called the US dollar. Now, it's so hard for us to be factually 100% correct, but
yes.
the short version is there was a period of time where if you had the US dollar was backed by gold. So it means that the value of the $1 bill you kept in your pocket was pegged to this thing called gold that everybody across the globe agreed was valuable.
So, pause.
Pause.
I have $1
Yes.
pegged by gold.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a metaphor,
Ooh.
wizard.
Okay, I don't know that I can give you a metaphor, but I'll give you an example.
Explain that further. I mean, is that the same as insured by gold?
It's not the same as insured by gold.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm going to walk myself back on that one.
Okay.
Here's what that meant.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go with years like, this is like 1900, okay?
Oh,
So
we're going back in time.
years. Oh, yeah, we're going to go back, okay?
Cool.
Now, year 1900.
Yeah.
Everyone, at least the mid 30-year-olds, knew what gold was, and they knew gold was valuable.
Okay.
And because of all the things that we discussed as the qualities of good money, everybody knew it was the superior form of money,
Okay.
right? But also, what were you going to say?
No, I'm just superior in my brain. I went right over shells, over salt,
Yes.
over things. It fit into all of these categories better than all the other options.
Yes.
Okay.
But because of things like portability, divisibility, acceptability, even, it became easier to print paper money
Okay.
and then hand that to people and basically say, okay, I know it's paper. It's not a coup grand,
Right.
but I swear to God, this thing is pegged to gold. And again, I'm going to get the
Okay, I'm
exact
following.
calculations wrong, right?
following.
And the people, me sitting here, I'm the bank and you're the consumer.
Yeah.
So I'm handing you a bunch of notes, paper notes. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I swear to God, it's backed by gold. And so there was a point in time, even in
Aha.
US history, where you as a person, if you held a dollar bill, you could walk into any bank and demand to be given the gold exchange for whatever it was at that point in time. So if you didn't
Okay.
want the paper anymore, it's like, nah, give me the precious metal gold because I know that thing's for sure valuable, right?
Got it.
So this thing, paper money, was introduced as sort of this means, like it's still attached to gold in a way.
Almost a receipt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost a receipt.
Okay.
Perfect. Receipt for gold, right?
Got it.
But it was easier for us to trade. I could stuff it in my pocket, I could fold it up, I could do different things with it, right? There's a bunch of other stuff that happens, but I think the biggest one relevant to us, the people today, is the year 1971. President Nixon is president, and he ends the gold standard, meaning the US dollar would no longer be backed by gold.
Yes. This
Dun,
blows
dun, dun.
my mind.
Big thing, okay?
Yeah.
So, and let's think about why it's a big deal.
I remember wrapping my arms around this the first time.
It's kind of tough.
It is a bit of a mind bender.
the reason this was, I think, equally so important. Sorry, it's gonna be hard for us to keep on topic.
That's okay.
So, 1971 ends the gold standard. There was this period of time between the end of World War II in 1971. When did World War II end, roughly?
45.
Okay, so let's say roughly late 40s to 1971. It was called Bretton Woods. You probably heard this phrase before. Brenton Woods. See? Check the show notes because we'll figure it out. We're going to say it wrong. Long story short, the important part here is because U.S. kind of came in and did its thing.
Yeah.
We basically got to say, hey, rest of world, you're going to peg all your currencies to the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar sort of became the thing that people measured the strength of their currency against. So barrel of oil, U.S. dollar. Right, kind of like it was the most significant monetary asset at the time.
Yeah.
But it's up until 1971, it's still backed by gold. So everyone's okay with this. They're like, screw it. Yes, you guys won World War II, so 100% we'll go ahead and peg our currencies to yours because you, U.S. dollar, are the most supreme. But we feel okay with that because we know it's backed by gold, meaning somewhere, aka Fort Knox, the U.S. is supposed to have all this gold that's backing all of the currency that's out in existence. Okay. So then Nixon comes in, boom, 1971, and removes the gold standard, meaning that the paper money no longer has to be backed by gold in any capacity. It loses its peg to the thing that for thousands of years up until this time was durable, portable, divisible, fungible, scarce, and acceptable.
I mean, I know I've heard Nixon. We've talked about this.
Yes.
I've read about it, but in every instance, and this may be something we address next time because I'm curious.
Yes.
Do you know why he did that? I don't know why.
Okay. So one of the things that we're going to get into, and this is where why this was such a big moment.
Yeah.
So if the U.S. no longer has to back it to anything, meaning the United States no longer has to back or peg its dollar to a hard, good money like
gold. We kind
gold.
of deleted accountability, essentially.
Well, acceptability was on the list, not accountability.
No, but
you're
like
right, we deleted our own accountability.
That's what I mean. We're no longer accountable.
No, meaning we
canceled the trainer.
We don't do the push-ups anymore.
No one's watching me. I'm gonna eat.
It meant that we could print as many paper dollars as we wanted. Now,
yeah, big
again,
moment.
Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty darn sure. 71.
Mm-hmm.
What possible reason would a president have to want to print money? He wants to stimulus,
more,
right?
To do more.
So my bet is if we go back to 1971, we're going to see some economic hardship.
Right.
We're probably going to see either, I don't know if we call it a recession, but leading up to recession, right? So, and we probably had a point in time where we needed to free ourselves of the gold peg handcuffs in order to get ourselves out of a tricky situation.
Okay.
Well, future episode, we'll totally go into 1971, removing the gold standard, all those things. But you just got to trust me on this for a moment.
And quick, I think I got us distracted. Bretton Woods was a time of really big growth in the United States.
Incredible growth in the United States.
We were on top of the mountain.
And not just for the United States.
The world.
There was
thriving.
This, prosperous. Yes, thriving.
Grass
is sort of
was
what
greener.
Grass was green for
Running
lots of
through
reasons.
The fields.
Running through the fields. So again, oh my gosh, you have this moment, 1971, Nixon removes the gold standard, meaning the United States can now put its finger on the print button and print as many US dollars as it wants to. That only took us 24 minutes to get through the qualities of good money. And now this perfect round 2 or chapter 2 of who prints the money.
Love it. Great transition.
You know who prints the money?
According to my paper, the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve. Yes, the Federal Reserve, also referred to as the U.S. Central Bank.
The Fed,
The
as the
Fed.
cool kids call it.
Again, you're listening to this in February 2025. The chairman of the Fed is Jerome Powell. You've probably seen his name or heard him even speak. So why is this such an important chapter to get into, right? Quality is a good money. You have that idea of what it is now, and you know that there's this big significant moment where we move away from gold,
Yeah.
and now the U.S. can freely print. So way back when, what was it, 1913, the Fed was created to quote unquote stabilize banks. At that point in time, they needed some help for whatever reason. But now the Fed actually, I'm not comfortable with this language. It heavily influences the economy through, number one, controlling the cost of money, aka interest rates,
Okay.
and the availability of money, which is printing money.
Okay, so let me repeat that.
Okay.
The Fed was created
Mm-hmm.
back yesteryear,
when.
1913, you
Yes.
say? To stabilize banks.
Yep. We're not going to get into that part.
We're going to skip over
We're
that.
going to skip that
That's
part.
not
Irrelevant for today's conversation.
great. Okay. And that was we're going to skip. We're going to skip that.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe we won't skip because there are some pieces to this. There's a relationship between the Fed
Mm-hmm.
and other big banks like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, right?
Okay.
The big banks of in the world today.
Okay.
And the relationship between them
Yeah.
is those big banks, JP Morgan Chase, when they borrow money to lend to people like you and I for mortgages, they borrow it from the Fed.
Okay.
And when
Okay, so that helps.
that does. It's not necessarily an effort of stabilization, but they borrow it from the Fed. They have to go to somewhere to get it, right?
Yeah.
Even though, yes, they're also using your dollars. Oh, there's
Oh,
so many episodes
I
in
know
here.
there's so many layers, but that's okay. Continue.
Got to bring it back. So Federal Reserve,
just-
all you got to know, this thing, U.S. Central Bank, they control the cost of money through interest rates,
Mhm.
and they print money.
Yep.
I'm going to pause here because I listened in the early days to so many people on podcast episodes talk about printing money. And eventually through some thorough Googling, figuring out like, what does that mean to actually print money? Like,
Ooh,
how
cool.
does that actually work?
Okay.
Right? So how does this work? Let's say you're the United States government
Okay.
and maybe you spend more money than you should, or you spend more money than you collect in taxes, right?
Whoops.
Whoops. So you need a loan. Okay.
Mm,
Darn it, I need a loan. Need to get some money from somewhere.
You've all been
right?
there.
So how might the U.S. be able to like raise some funds?
Okay.
And the way it does this is it issues treasury bonds.
They don't do a
or
bake sale?
bonds. No.
Just kidding.
That'd be great though.
Treasury bonds.
They issue treasury bonds. And you mentioned that we might get into this, stocks and bonds, right? Different financial assets. A
Yes.
bond is basically just an IOU. So let's say the Bank of Taylor issued a bond and Haley bought the bond
Mm-hmm.
and the bond's $100.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for buying my bond. You're so great. I swear to God, I'm going to pay you back your $100 and I'm going to give you 2% interest on that baby. So I'm going to give you $2 extra when I pay this thing back.
Following.
Cool. Just an IOU.
Fantastic.
So for every bond,
description.
there's an interest rate. They're almost typically low. And there's a time horizon on that bond. There's an expectation that I'm going to pay you back in a
okay.
1 year, a 3 year,
That's
a 5
right.
year period of time.
Okay.
So the U.S.,
Following.
you need some money.
Yep.
How do I raise money? I'm going to issue bonds.
Great.
Someone's got to agree to buy those bonds.
Yeah.
Right? So this is where the Fed comes in. So you have the Fed, and they want to help the U.S. out. The way they do that is they walk over to their printing
The
machine.
Fed wants to help the U.S. out.
To be fair, you're right. It's a very, such a big
Turducken.
statement. It's a turducken statement in that I don't want to say the Fed has a requirement to help the U.S. out, but there's a more or less requirement for them.
That's
to
kind of a
help the
wild
US out.
thought because
I
they
know.
are the U.S.
Well, I know. So and they're not controlled by government. So that's the other weird part. I know.
The look on my face.
The look on your
Can't
face.
wait to see how attractive that was.
This is more of like this gets into some of like the really, really complicated topics of the relationship between the Fed and the U.S. government and how we've even gotten here at this point in time. But you're right, a little bit sketchy and weird that the people that control the money printer more or less have to buy the bonds from the U.S. Okay, so but how does the Fed buy the bonds? They go, oh, no problem. Maybe they have cash on their balance sheets, but most of the time they walk over to the printer and they print money. So boop.
For
now I
real.
have 100%.
For real.
So now I have, I'm going to make this up. I have, boop, $500 billion, right?
Okay, yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, here's these new 500 billion US dollars. Oh, you have a bond over there, US? Sure. So I hand the US government $500 billion, and now I'm holding on to the bond, right, at a, 2% interest rate. It's a 10-year bond, so we'll pay back in 10 years. And so in doing so, now you're the United States. So now you have new money to inject into the economy, right? You can do stuff with it, right? You can
I'm
give it
starting
to
track.
Medicare, Medicaid. You can Social Security. Right? You can fund new programs, buy new infrastructure, right? All these different things.
Yeah.
Again, I'm saying this. I hope no one takes me literally of like me assuming that they're going to do all these great things with their dollars because like they don't seem to be very good at spending them. But long story short, that is one of the ways, and perhaps one of the primary ways that money makes its way into the world.
So essentially, you can say that's in modern day. We're not digging in the hills of Sacramento for
Right.
gold. In modern day, money comes from the Fed, who prints it,
Right.
and essentially buys bonds from the government.
Yes.
And the government then injects that cash into the universe, and that's the cash that then we have.
Eventually, blah, blah,
It
blah.
trickles down. It trickles down probably to quite a few
If
filters.
the Larrys and the Lyns are listening, I know how generalized this is, and I hope that you're okay with it, but because there are definitely some generalities that we're making.
For sure.
The other example I'll throw out there,
We're in class 101.
we're in class 1, okay?
Yeah.
In addition, there's also then the piece of JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo also
Right.
getting to, there's some new print. I would equally like to borrow some of that money, right? So I'll grab some of those billions. Yes, I'll borrow 10 billion from the Fed, right? At a 2% interest rate or 3%
right, because
interest
the
rate.
Fed supports.
Not just the US, but large banks, propping up large banks. So I know, gosh, your
Fascinating.
face, I know, is like, yes, it's like, this is weird. And it is. It's very strange.
I mean, I hope our audience who's listening, who's watching my face, if you're watching this. And here's the thing, everybody. I have actually heard this before. Probably multiple times. And that's why I'm so glad that Taylor is here to explain it yet again. And please know, I mean, maybe you can use this as a resource going forward, or you earmark it and go look it up yourself. But I have heard this before, and it still sounds new because in two categories. One, it's complicated as insert bad word. And two, especially if it's new. And two, it's bananas.
It's bananas because I'm going to go back to chapter 1. Just like many of us,
It doesn't seem real.
just like many of us on the daily
Yeah.
don't think about the quality of our money.
Right.
Many of us don't think about of the power and impact the Fed has on our everyday life.
No,
Okay.
no.
This is one of the lasting pieces of this particular chapter 2, the Fed, like kind of what it is and how it operates.
Okay.
Truly, also in the future, I want to do an episode where we are objectively looking at this process, because I feel like in a lot of finance Bitcoin rhetoric, like looking around the Fed,
Yeah.
almost exclusively demonized.
I was
right?
going to say
Pretty much bad.
They're villainized
You
most
right?
of the time.
And there's a lot of very, very, very smart people in the space. So I'm gonna bet that they have a lot of really good reasons to think that.
We are not
Uh,
macroeconomists.
no, economists.
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 Macro,
Economists. We are not. We are not.
clearly.
No.
'Cause-
Okay, but wait, walk it back. So
that was your tooth
We-
factor
but we-
authentication
we-
that we are not lying.
we jumped over right at the end there, a huge deal.
yeah.
Okay. Fed, push button, money printer. Money makes its way into the world. It's no longer
Trickles
pegged to
down.
gold. Okay. So this thing, aka fiat money,
Yeah.
makes its way into the world. How many people? Oh, this is from Larry's book. I didn't know this literally until the other day. I was like, how many people do you think sit on the board of the Fed to make these
I
decisions?
know the answer to this.
What is this?
12.
12. Okay, so for those of you listening, 12 humans in the United States, 12
That we don't
make
know
the
the names of.
decisions for you in terms of whether or not more money is printed, the cost of interest rates, all of these things which send asset prices, stocks, equities, real estate up and down, like they have massive impact on your world.
Global
And
rippling.
almost very few are thinking about them, thinking about like, wow, they hold a lot of our fate in their hands. Okay.
12.
But that process, though, of injecting new money, I want you all to picture a glass of, I don't know, iced tea. Okay? Glass of
Delightful.
iced tea, right? And then we're going to, that ultimately represents the current amount of money in the United States, the amount of USD floating
Cup of
out there,
tea.
right? Cup of tea. And then I want you to picture a big bunch of water, a water pitcher, $500 billion versus a water pitcher, okay? And I pour it into the tea, thus diluting the tea. Still tea, technically, right?
Now it's just slightly weirdly flavored water.
So losing value in a way over a period of time. So
Yeah.
this process of printing and injecting money into the economy results in something called inflation, which we briefly
ding, ding.
briefly discussed in the last episode. But long story short, it just means your buying power goes down over a period of time because the literal dollars in your hand have lost value. They have been diluted
Because there was more.
because there was more.
Maybe take a breath.
Take a breath.
So let's recap.
Can you recap? Recap for us.
Let's recap.
Recap. I'm out of water.
That's good.
Sweating so much too. Oh.
Right? But you're sweating probably
Ugh.
because you were talking. I was sweating because I was nervous. Different. Recap.
We're only 2 pages into 5 pages too, by the way. Dang it.
We're moving. I think
We
we're
are.
moving at a
Okay,
good pace. This
that's
is
good.
Big stuff.
Big stuff.
Big stuff. We made big stuff. I think you're doing great because I'm following.
Thanks.
So I love where we started.
Mm-hmm.
What is good money? We went over the attributes of good money.
Yep.
And really, we saw that the last form of really kick ass money was gold. Eventually, we reached a point in time where we're going to trust there was some requirement to get us out of a sticky situation where we abandoned the super good money.
Sorry, we abandoned the gold peg of the U.S. paper dollar to gold.
That's, yep,
Yep.
better said. And in that moment, handcuffs off,
Yep.
print on.
Yep.
That is that section.
That is that section.
And we realize it's the start of a new era.
Yes.
Bingo, bango, bongo.
Now,
Pause.
yeah.
That all makes sense.
Does it?
It does.
That's good.
Yeah.
I feel like we got really hung up on the word economist.
Well,
Macroeconomist.
something to learn.
Bretton Woods. I don't think it's Brenton. I think it's Bretton Woods. But I'm really glad that we have to check. We're going to hold ourselves accountable to the right stuff.
We are.
I do know it's 1971, and I know it was Nixon for sure. So that's a win. Okay.
That all makes sense. I think that was great. It's fascinating. You can dive into the history if you're curious. Maybe it'll come up in future episodes. But then we enter the Fed. We
Now-
were talking about what the Federal Reserve is.
We're going to do a little bit more on the Fed. A
Okay.
little bit more. Okay. So,
Ready.
so what? Who cares if the Fed holds a bunch of U.S. Treasury bonds, right? So remember, back in the story, U.S. needed some money, created its thing called bonds.
Yeah.
And it's like, who the hell's going to buy these things? Oh, yay, the Fed has a printer. They'll just buy some. They'll print some money and buy it.
Okay.
So now the Fed has these IOUs, right? There is in some ways an expectation that like the United States is going to pay us back the original amount of money we loaned. plus whatever
Yeah,
the
there's
bond
the
interest rate
incentive,
was,
and
right?
the incentive is, let's just new term.
Yeah.
The incentive on the IOU is that there is an interest
A
rate
little bit of an interest
attached.
rate. But long story short, that means the Fed has now added those U.S. Treasury bonds to its balance sheet. It's owed that money back from the United States. And again, these bonds have maturity dates, right? So 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 30 year. There's a lot of different maturity dates on
This is
bonds.
when my eyes start to twitch.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's the problem though? When you hear about the US, does the government sound like a fiscally responsible entity?
I would say most would at this moment vote no.
No. Why? Because you hear debt, you hear debt clock, you hear we can't pay back our loans, you hear all these crazy things. And all of these things are correct. The United States does not have the money to pay back the loan. This would be the equivalent of
This is when
I know, right? Painful problem.
What?
This would be the equivalent of I'm gonna make up a situation. You have a neighbor who
Yep.
you know is in massive credit card debt.
Yeah.
Massive. They've talked to you about it 1,000 times. It's on the news how bad they're in credit card debt. And then they come to you and they're like, "Can I have some money? I swear to God, I'm going to pay it back with interest." And you're like, "Totally." That's basically what occurs. Okay. So when the bond,
Yeah.
no, okay, well, whatever. But we're good. We're good people. He seems like a good guy. He'll totally pay me back, right?
Yeah.
So, and all that's fine. It's on the balance sheet. Like, I'm pretty sure he'll get a job and like figure his stuff out. Like, right? We'll get back to me
Yeah.
over time. But let's say 10 years goes by. It was a longer maturity bond. 10 years goes by. What happens when the bond matures and you go a knocking on your neighbor's door, or in this case, the United States, and you're like, "Hey, I'd like my money back plus the 2%. So either A, they can pay back the debt, which again, if anyone has checked, the United States only continues to go further and further into debt, meaning it don't have the cash to pay you back. Or what does it do? Issue new bonds to just roll over the debt, right? It's like, shit, I need to go pay that credit card bill.
Holy hell.
Well, why don't I just issue more bonds to cover that bill that I have, right? But who does it go back to? The Fed again. So it creates more bonds over here. It's like, I know you already bought those ones, and I'm gonna pay you back with money that you give me right now. So here's some new bonds that are, again, 10, 20, 30 year yield, or duration. And so give me some money. Print some money. Can you just print some money over there? Print your 500 billion. Okay, great. Okay, now it's in my pocket. Here's the money back for those other bonds that I already borrowed over there. Legitimately, what occurs? That's what occurs. So you're just piling credit card debt on top of credit card debt on top of credit card debt. And while I cannot say that this is factually 100% correct,
Stunned.
the government usually always chooses that option to just roll over the debt, right? Meaning the debt keeps growing. I am going to plug James Lavish, another phenomenally intelligent individual in this space. If you just Google James Lavish and debt spiral, you can there's YouTube videos. I believe he's got a paper
I
out
remember
on it.
listening to that. That was good.
He has just a great, really easy way to wrap your arms around this. But just because we're recording a podcast today, so of course I typed into Google, what's the current U.S. debt? February 13th, so this a couple days ago.
Okay.
What do you think the U.S. debt is at right now? Throw out a number.
Bazillion's not a real number, so it's trillions.
It is trillions. 36.22 trillion. 36.22. And the reason we call this the reason very, very people that are way smarter than us call this a debt spiral
I mean, it seems like an apt description.
is because the debt, it is double the debt from 15 years ago. We have doubled our
That's
debt
it?
in 15 years.
15 years.
So that's the part where that's what gets scary about the interest rate tied to this money and the amount of money that even goes back to paying interest. That the debt just goes up and up and up. In fact, again, Google fact.
Okay.
Excuse me. Part of that 36.22 trillion that's sitting on the books right now, 14% of our money, the United States, goes to paying off interest on the debt. Just paying off the interest, not the debt itself. So, long story short, the
My
US
eyebrows are tired. They're just
the
going up
US
and down,
government-
up and down.
US Gov right now never really pays off its debt. It just issues more debt to cover past obligations. And so, right in this example, every turn of that is more printing, more printing, more printing, which leads to
hurts my
more
body.
and more and more inflation. Other quick pause. So, thus far, we've covered good money or sound money. We've covered the Fed, loosely what it is, what it's responsible for, largely money printing, and who's its number one customer, the United States government, right? We know we've gone off the gold peg, and so now we can freely print. The handcuffs are off. And in doing so, we've gotten ourselves into a situation where we're 36.22 trillion in debt as a nation, and all signs are pointing to that debt only increasing over a period of time, which means, again, the interest goes up over a period of time, meaning we're going to have to print more to cover the interest on the debt, thus the spiral. It just keeps going.
If I knew
getting
effects,
worse,
I'm
getting
learning
worse.
effects and After Effects. Like this is when you do those like
Yeah.
black spiral,
Spirally eye
or the
things.
snake in the Jungle
Cool.
Book. Ooh, I have to stretch. 'cause
Okay.
It's just like every time I hear it, I think that's why you've told me it like 15 times and why we've watched it and listened to it. Because every time you hear it, it's it takes your breath away. And I'm thinking like modern day, modern. Oh my God, this is gonna make me old. There's a movie, Girls, Confessions of a Shopaholic,
Mm.
and she has a shopping problem, credit card problem, right? And then we're all picturing back in the day, and they're like, you need to stop spending on credit, cut them up. And they get out scissors and they start cutting up all her credit cards, and she's like crying in the corner, and she's like, but how am I gonna? The thing is, the difference between that and this is that she can be cured. There's a path to exit because it's just her own self and her
Sure.
own problems and her own credit cards. She may own a F ton of money somewhere, but she has friends and family who can maybe help her out, get a plan together, stop going to Neiman's, start going to TJ, get it under control.
Sure.
The consequence is that she starts losing out maybe on fancy dinners. She's got to go make her own food. She has to shop at cheaper stores, so on and so forth, to get herself back on track.
It's interesting you would bring up the word consequence because we're going to come up to that here in a second.
Okay. When you have it on the scale of this, that's where my eyes start to go cross, because you're thinking, someone's going to come in,
Someone's going to save the day,
slap
right?
the wrist,
100%.
cut up their credit cards. They can go cry in the corner for a minute. Then we get back on track as a team. But when it's at this scale, how on earth does that happen? And also, you kind of start to worry that if that does happen, if we trickle down to our daily lives,
Yep.
I'm thinking those consequences aren't so fun.
So I will do my best to not get messy in this particular area, but consequence, I think, is a nice segue because something else we wanted to do is, again, so what? Why should you care, you,
Yeah.
the listener, about the U.S. constantly rolling over its debt? Because here's what's going to happen. You and I are going to end this podcast. We're going to walk outside. We're going to cook some dinner.
Yep.
Probably watch something on TV.
Yep.
I'm going to keep reading Larry's book because it's awesome and
Yeah.
go to bed. I'm going to try to go to bed, but to be honest, the moment I start reading his book, it's going to be my brain turning for about 17
It's
hours.
not the
this
same
evening.
for me.
No, you are out like a light. So
2 minutes.
these things, again, these are not facts. If anything, I think at this point, this is more opinion
Okay.
and also anecdotal observations that I'm going to drop in. But the first thing is that this problem of inflation, maybe up until right now, has been more of a long tail problem. Maybe most weren't feeling it on the day to day, but over several years, right? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years increments, they've really started to see what it's done to their lives, their savings, and how they operate in the world. Don't worry.
Pause.
I'm
Okay.
coming up as to why. So again, We know more debt equals more money printing equals higher inflation.
More debt equals more money printing equals higher inflation.
Right.
Yes. Move on.
So inflation matters because it reduces the value of your savings and wages over a period of time.
That makes sense.
So but on those two, the reason it reduces your savings, and again, in this illustrative example, we'll say a savings account. If you have $100 in the savings account and inflation, which is ultimately eroding the value of that dollar over a period of time, and we'll stay light. Let's say at 2% inflation, that $100 goes down by 2%. So the next year, it's 2%. It's worth 2% less in terms of buying power.
I was
going to
say buying power.
You still see the 100.
The
in your
100
bank
doesn't
account.
then become $80, but the strength of that $100 out in the world
Correct.
is less.
And it impacts your wages because again, you're earning money that's going into a checking account. Those dollars are equally going down in value over a period of time. Maybe again, we'll flash a graphic if we can, or Google it yourself to looking at the power of the US dollar over the last 100 years. And it's this just massive down and to the right in terms of its strength over a period of time. So like we said on episode 1, most people, I would imagine, want to ensure that their savings and the money that they're earning or their wages are as strong as humanly possible, right? Not going down over a period of time.
Yes.
And make no mistake, folks who are listening, they are going down. And so this becomes a problem when you get to times like right now. So it's 2025. I know we're a couple of years past, but we're sort of now past our COVID era.
Yep.
And when COVID hit and the economy really started to struggle, what happened? The Fed basically dropped interest rates to 0%.
Zero.
Basically zero.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was zero, actually.
It was zero, yeah.
Which means that the cost of money was nothing. You could borrow a lot of money to buy houses, buy cars, buy all sorts of things. And there was also a fairly significant print, right? Because if people are going to borrow money, there needs to be money to borrow.
Okay.
So what happened? You have this like little V-shaped curve of the economy. Oh, cool, economy comes back over a period of time. But then because we injected so much money into the economy, a little thing called inflation crept up.
Our iced tea diluted.
So inflation,
More water.
which perhaps we can put into the show notes or something like that, over the last couple of years, I think there was even a point of time where it was reaching like 6, 7, 8, 9%. That's not 2%.
No.
So think about that annually. Your
Right.
money going down
9%.
6, 7, 8, 9%. And I'm going to be very careful because that may be factually incorrect, but we're close. We're in that region.
Sure.
So again, we'll put it in the show notes. So what does then the government do? And this is now about 18, 24 months ago. So when, sheboygan, inflation is out of control, it does the opposite. It slows money printing, right? So inject less into the world.
Rewind.
Okay. So
You just repeat that.
put yourself into a couple of years ago
Okay.
where all of a sudden inflation is at an all-time high,
It's at a high.
9% or whatever it was, 8%, right?
Yes.
A couple of years back. So if you're Jerome Powell,
Yep.
you're the chairman of the Fed,
Yep.
what do you do? What do you do as the Fed if inflation's now at an all-time high? You, A, turn off the printer,
Right. You want to slow it down.
slow it down.
Yeah.
Okay. Turn off the printer.
Okay.
Or you increase the interest rate. You make the cost of borrowing money really, really high so people stop borrowing it and stimulating the economy. People stop buying houses. They stop buying cars. They stop buying stuff, all of those things, right? So we now find ourselves, you, me, and everyone else listening to this, February of 2025,
Yeah.
in kind of an interesting landscape. So I think the prime rate, which is the interest rate that the Fed uses, is about 6%, maybe a little higher, closer to 7.
Wow.
Okay. And again, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, all these companies all these banks, that prime rate is what they borrow money at.
I was going to say, that's not what we get to borrow
No.
at.
So if you are a late 20s, early 30s, maybe even your 40s, and you're looking to do what humans do, right? Buy a car, buy a house, things that seem so typical
Yeah.
in your parents' era, right?
Now it feels so hard.
And you're trying to buy a home at a 7% interest rate, 7.5, 8% interest rate, it's literally, it becomes untenable. Many people, most will not be able to do those things. So it's those that might be sitting there. And if you are listening to this, again, thank you. But going like, man, some of that hardship that we talked about in episode number 1, it's not just about swiping and things being literal, the price of goods being more expensive at the register.
Right.
It's these other larger artifacts of life that you are now ultimately not able to do because of these very things. So that's just as you as the person, right? Like that is directly what this is. So, and let's say you are a person and you're hoping you found a house. All you're doing is you're just waiting for that interest rate to drop, right? You're like, come on.
Yeah.
Cross your fingers. It's got to happen, right? I heard Jerome is going to get on and he's going to cut the interest rates to insert value. But like, let's even imagine that Jerome got up there, which for those interested, typically if there are any interest rate cuts, they're always cut at about a quarter of a point a time.
Sure.
So, but let's just imagine Jerome got up there and he cut them by 3 or 4 points. We're going to drop interest rates back down to 3. Again, what happens is that all of a sudden everyone wants to borrow money to buy things, right?
Guess
and
where
then
the money comes
inflation
from.
comes back again. It's like
Yeah.
it's literally it's a really unfortunate spiral. So you as a person, why should you care about this?
Yeah.
There is a downstream impact, and I promise you it is impacting in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
The other, and these are again some of the more ominous pieces, right? Meaning that again, the economy, the U.S. owes the Fed the IOU plus the 2% interest, right? So the interest payments alone have the potential to sort of cripple an economy, if you will. So as that debt grows over 36.22 grows over a period of time, what can the government do? It could raise taxes. No one wants their taxes to go up. That's why very rarely does a president win on the podium of I'm going to hike taxes to high hell, right? We aren't interested in giving more of our money away. As I said, it's already hard enough to live as it is, right? So who the heck's going to vote for higher taxes so that the U.S. can pay off its debt? Virtually nobody. So
unlikelihood
goes there, okay?
Next to nil.
Ooh, okay, next one. To your point on consequence, and you said the shopaholic. She's like, okay, maybe she's shopping at TJ Maxx. They could cut spending. Where could the U.S. cut spending? They'd have to cut spending on the places that they spend the most.
Right.
Military, Social Security, Medicare, infrastructure.
That's
if you're in your 60s and you have a Social Security check coming in that you rely on, how excited are you to hear from, again, presidential nominee of someone who's going to cut your Social Security check?
Yeah, essentially the consequences of the consequences are crippling.
Layer back to us people, right?
Yeah.
You want your taxes raised, cut spending on major programs, right? Or again, their option, print more money. So thus the spiral continues again. Those are the 3 options, by the way. This is not, you do not need a PhD in macroeconomics to understand these things. As the debt grows, they have 3 options: raise taxes, cut spending, or print more money. It's the only way. It's the same thing that applies to you and I. If we got ourselves into a financial situation, what could we do? We can't raise taxes because we can't tax anybody, but we could say, go make more money somewhere else. We can't print money, or we could cut our spending. You and I only have 2 options, right? They can go just print it if they want to. Bananas.
I want to pause again.
Yes.
Because what I'm hoping, because you are very skilled at this, and I could see you like getting in your zone. We had an agreement that before this episode, that if I started to feel like I was glazing over, that I got to like halt. They haven't glazed.
They haven't.
They've more like exploded, but I haven't gotten glazed yet. And again, I want to reiterate, I have heard this before. Take a breath. What I love about what you're describing is like, your example of like sitting there waiting for interest rates to just, oh, they're going to be cut again, right?
Yep.
Right. Back to COVID. What I loved is you've taken us through this entire stepping effect. There's a better through line of explaining it, because it doesn't just happen.
Nope.
None of this is just happening.
Nope.
You don't all of a sudden have these epiphanies and it's like, oh, what? And it's moving and you're watching it. But this is like there's reasons. I feel like so often with the trust score being so low in so many areas. I mean, I until we started to dive into this, I would say I would just follow the wave. It seems so opinionated. It's not. This is functional. It's not us just going here like your dollars are going down because it's the soundbite we want you to hear. There is a reason. They're tied to reasons.
100%.
This is not just
100%. I said it again. Damn it.
That's right. I kind of was speaking in slow. I am a
big
pentameter. Jinx. Just because I'm processing, but I think you did a great job of explaining it, and feel free to let us know if you want us to explain anything again.
I was also incorrect
but there
on
are
one thing,
reasons.
by
Yeah.
the way, of what I had just said a second ago.
Sure.
Raise taxes, cut spending, print more money. I left off an option.
Ooh.
They could default on the debt.
Oh,
They could
right.
just bail. Okay.
What happens?
So we'll think about this. Let's not, you and I
Yeah.
have never had to declare bankruptcy as people. However, I feel like we have a loose understanding of maybe what happens if one was to declare bankruptcy. If we got so bad in debt, what happens? Okay?
Can you kind of
Chapter 11 I'm
always
filing
heard it,
bankruptcy. Well, what happens?
I just picture big bold letters.
You filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Long story short is you carry around that bankruptcy for a little while with you, meaning your credit goes into the tank, right?
Yeah.
Because hey, it's like, well, hey, you had a shot at being a person and being a good steward of that debt. Didn't work out, so your credit score is going to go down because borrowers should know you're not super good at managing money, right?
Right.
Becomes difficult to recoup. And so this is where this is going to be very strange, perhaps, to have empathy for our counterparts that are in government, for Jerome Powell and those people.
Oh yeah.
Tough spot to be in, man.
I was going to say in the
Tough spot.
very beginning when you mentioned his name, I was going to say I don't know if he sleeps
Like,
at night.
how could he?
Oh my gosh.
Honestly, how could he? Because
How can
that
one
option,
person-
by the way,
Yeah.
defaulting, that is, I can only imagine what that would do to the world to default on interest rate payments.
What does it default at that scale even look like?
I don't.
And who do you?
I don't think
declare it
anyone
to?
knows.
Like,
I think. Okay, conservatively,
Yeah.
I think that's where it starts to look like Great Recession. It starts to look like 07, 08, 09. Like
Got
around
it.
housing crisis, around people losing jobs, around people losing pensions and retirement funds and all the things. Conservatively,
Mm.
that's not to mention what other things could potentially happen if the United States defaults on its debt.
But that is the fourth.
What I know, someone, a true, someone who's been in the Bitcoin space for a long time would say every time we raise the debt ceiling, we are in a way already defaulting on our debt. But to those that are new to this, just know that that technically is a fourth option, but nothing in a historical context would suggest that the U.S. is going to let itself default. It will always continue to print and do the other things. Couple of other highlights. Again, we still aren't even done with this section of why it matters to you, the person, but just some other high-level things. We both have parents, thankfully, still thriving in their 60s,
Hi,
right?
Mom.
And your parents, even relatively recently
And Dad.
retired, right? Yeah, hi both. Both recently retired, right?
Yes.
And for any retirees out there, and again, I'm giving sort of a loose characterization. When people refer to like quote unquote their retirement,
Yeah.
they're also referring to like, oh yeah, the like big bag of money that I've been putting into the stock market and into my
Yeah.
portfolio for a period of time, my 401k, right?
Yeah.
Hearing all these words. So for those that have retired, you probably end up watching the market pretty closely, more closely than you want to, because of the bit of the volatility caused by this, right?
Yeah.
As interest rates drop, woohoo! Banks get really excited because there's going to be so much money to give to end consumers, and the stock market soars. Oh my gosh, my 401k is doing amazing, right? Look at, oh my gosh, the S&P is doing so great. Jerome Powell comes on, says something terrible about inflation, and maybe we're going to have to raise rates again. Like, right, the stock market comes crashing down. So there are these boom and bust cycles that occur. And for those with 401ks, with investments of any kind, even our home value, right? It's like, right, we know like in boom periods, like, woohoo, home equity's gone up because people are buying up homes around us and they're spending bigger dollars, which forces our equity up. So for those that own assets, like you're kind of like staring at it like, oh my gosh, please let everything be okay, is the first thing.
Okay.
The second, though, is that because of this, if you don't own assets, if you don't have a house yet, if you don't have money to put away on to investments or any of those things, inflation just makes it harder and harder for you to get in the game, to purchase any of those things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, lastly, when debt does spiral out of control, so like, right, when a country would potentially default or stop paying, that's where the U.S. is probably not in a situation where it will ever do that. So it just continues to devalue the dollar by printing and doing those things. That's where all of this kind of comes to a head. So life savings doesn't go as far as you think it will. Those retirement plans start to erode in terms of their long-term purchasing power. So for like you and I, again, we still have many, many years left to work, but it's how much money might we need if we're fortunate enough to retire at that point in time? And then what will the power of those dollars ultimately be?
I think that was my favorite word you said, purchasing power. Purchasing power, that really strings it all because I feel like we could bounce between all these different words.
Right.
And the value, the number, all the different things of this money.
Yep.
Purchasing power, I don't know if that helped anybody else, but that really helps give it a face for me.
To round out this little section on like why it matters to you, U.S. debt crisis isn't just a government problem. It is very much a you problem, and it is affecting savings, it's affecting retirement, and it's very much affecting future. So that's also... Boo!
Don't worry, we're not going to end on super sad.
No, definitely not. But also, from episode
but
1...
are you feeling it?
Like,
no, I'm just kidding. Like, but I did say, like, there are things that we're going to look at that blow your
topics,
mind.
man. These are tough. And, like, oh, my gosh, we are, like, the dum-dums of the world coming in talking about this. Like, again, Lawrence Lepard, Lynn Alden, James Lavish, Preston Pish, Peter McCormick. Like, there are some people out there, highly, highly, highly intelligent individuals that this has been their world for a very long time. Would highly recommend listening, reading from them as well. But
yeah, I'd call us enthusiasts at the
enthusiasts. You know, definitely enthusiasts. But okay,
yeah. Okay, so we've gone through defining what good money.
Yep.
Looks like. We've gone through the Fed.
Yep.
We've touched on inflation.
Yep.
You've given us a good insight into the reasons why certain things are the way they are.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've had to look down the barrel of what the debt spiral looks like. And, you know, we're speculating on what the future looks like. But there are pieces of that we can understand. If you look up, you can look up the debt clock online, and there's a visual.
Can we do it right now?
Sure.
Hold on. I'm just going
to do it right now. There's a visual. It
here.
kind of is like a slot machine. Like, it's just spinning. It's going so much faster than you think. But we've looked down the barrel of that.
USDebtClock.org. U.S. national debt, real time.
Oh my God,
US.
remember when you could call and see what time it was? This is kind of like that. That was the best.
Okay. Top left-hand side of the screen, U.S. national debt, which again, it's just clicking up. 36,488,965,000,000, and it's about to turn to 966. So
is there like a visual of it?
Yeah. I mean, it's nutty, but that's a lot. That's a lot of debt.
If you're not overwhelmed already.
Can you see it?
Someone needs a glass of wine with that one. Okay, so we've looked down the barrel of what that might look like. Obviously, the speculative consequences of that, we can go on for days.
Yes.
But really, at the end of it, the debt is going up. The Federal Reserve owns, would you say, owns a lot of that? How do you say that? Who
Correct.
owns the debt?
Well, you're right. It's on the
It's on the
books of the Fed as
Fed's balance sheet.
their balance sheet, right? And again, technically the U.S. pays them by rolling it in new.
And by I say debt, we discussed the bonds.
Yeah.
The Fed owns a majority of those bonds. Also other countries around the world. I mean,
I think long story short, the main thing is like the U.S. debt. U.S. debt going up and to the right. The only way that they can continue to service that debt is through money printing. And money printing really hurts.
Yeah, we discussed that the other options, they're not savory. And you need, I was going to say, balls of steel to face that dragon, to slay that dragon. And then, and we're all experiencing the effects. Inflation is a big word. We've touched on it. It goes much deeper than this, but
we're at just over an hour.
Okay.
And I'm sure some people are like, oh,
my brain
goodness,
hurts.
can we stop
Again,
now?
I'm sweating.
So we got to leave on a bit of a high.
I would agree.
Because neither you nor I have an economics background. Neither you nor I,
is episode
right? We don't
Page 4.
We don't have a career spent trading the markets and right sitting here. So I want to leave people with the thought and notion that there is a solution out there. And coming up to the very first chapter that we talked about, good money, sound money, it would seem like credit card moment in Shopaholics. If there was a way to go, man, we really need to look in the mirror and we need to consider our monetary system and the type of money that we're using to try and get ourselves perhaps out of this predicament.
Yeah.
That's where Bitcoin starts to come in. What we will not cover on this episode, frankly, this would take a long time to get to, is how the U.S. would specifically use Bitcoin to start to remediate some of that issue, debt problem.
Yeah, that feels
much bigger problem.
feels down the road.
So instead, we're just going to leave with more of a teaser on perhaps why Bitcoin is some of the best money of all time.
I love that.
Where
We're
that
going
kind of
back
comes
to that
from.
big,
Right to that first part.
big
Base layer,
bold
right? Base
statement.
layer
It's
money.
a big statement.
So, those first topics, right? And you got to hold me again because I can't look back at all the sheets of paper. You got to hold me to durability, portability, divisibility, all those things. So,
yes.
I'm not going to do them exactly in order.
No, go for it.
But because we're talking about money printing and the fact that there are no handcuffs, thus US dollars are no longer scarce, right? Scarcity probably feels like maybe the number one thing to orient around. So even after this episode, you're still not going to exactly know what Bitcoin is or where it came from, that's okay, because maybe you trust in Taylor and Haley a little bit. The first thing you need to know, Bitcoin has a cap. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. That's built into the code, the Bitcoin protocol that's out there in the world and running as we speak. That's the cap. There will never be more than that. So even if we consider this Bitcoin perhaps up against gold,
I was going to say, yes.
We know that there's more gold stuffed in the earth in certain places, and I'm sure there's a lot of technology out there that knows where large pockets are. It's going to take time to get there, right? But even in this case, Bitcoin is more scarce than gold. Now,
I kind of want to touch on that really quick, just to kind of make sure that's super clear. So we have gold that we've talked about is scarce, but let's say, somebody discovers a huge deposit and is able to mine it and injects that into the gold supply.
Right.
That scarcity isn't guaranteed. So there's a chance that that gold supply, the value of gold, can be diluted if something magical happens. It's in the earth, though it's scarce. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Up until Bitcoin, it was hands down the most scarce.
But in comparison to even Bitcoin, we're not going to find more in the earth.
No.
Bitcoin has 21 million. Gold is still a mystery. So I guess that's what I wanted to say of gold is awesome, but this is why Bitcoin is even more scarce.
Yes.
I
now,
hope that makes sense.
And for again, this is where it's hard to get into. So right now, I could look it up on my phone, and maybe I will before the end of this episode. Sitting here today, February, whatever it is. What's today?
The
Sunday?
16th?
Sure, somewhere around
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
There have not
Maybe.
been 21 million Bitcoin issued into the world. That hasn't happened yet. The Bitcoin protocol won't issue its final Bitcoin or its final part of it until I don't even know, 21 something. So
Well, we can find that out when we dive into what that means in a future
it's
episode.
far away from now.
Yeah.
Okay, so not only is it scarce, but it's not all out into the world yet. And what I find happens with those that are intrigued by this topic, but maybe again they're inquisitive. They're like, but
Or
there's
skeptical.
They're skeptics, sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 21 million, or again, I'm loosely guessing. Oh, there's 16 million out there right now. It's like, but there's how many? 8 billion people in the world, right? If
Yeah.
this is ever going to be used as money, how could we possibly do that with so few Bitcoin?
Mm.
And so getting into the next part of divisibility, right? Being able to break it into smaller units. So for those of you who are maybe interested in buying Bitcoin,
Mhm.
you do not have to buy a whole Bitcoin. It's about $100,000 right now, maybe a little less. That's a lot of cheese. Bitcoin is divisible to the 8th decimal place. That's
Try
a
that
lot
again.
of decimals. Bitcoin, thank you.
Decimal turns out doesn't have a TH.
No, the decimal place. Bitcoin is divisible to the 8th decimal place. So
Eighth
8th.
decimal.
Okay, so that means 1.00000000, the 8th decimal place.
Incredible.
Now, if you were, maybe on our screen, we can show this. If you were to take your pen and bounce that decimal back 8 places, right, you get to the final slot, and you put a 1 in that slot, right? 0.00000001.
Does that have a name, Taylor?
That is called a SAT, shorthand for Satoshi, as kind of a moniker for Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin. So you could right now go out and buy just a few sats of Bitcoin. You do not need to buy one. But the reason I bring up this divisibility is if you actually start thinking about Bitcoin in terms of sats, there's plenty of Bitcoin to go around for the 8 billion of us or so that are in the world. So scarcity, check yes. Divisibility, check yes. What else do we have to talk about here?
Durability.
Durability. Ooh. So,
That's- We could pick a different one. Portability is actually interesting.
So the durability aspect is a key one. They're all key, but it of course equally important. It's different for Bitcoin in the sense that, like with durability, right? In that case, like with gold or something that matters, like it's a hard metal. For this is a digital currency that's out there, so it's different, right? The weather isn't going to impact like a Bitcoin necessarily. I think for a lot of people, they may confuse or conflate durability with overall security, like, right, not getting hacked, like having one, right, not losing one. It's a completely different episode of like how to store and secure Bitcoin.
Sure.
But rest assured, yes, wildly durable as a currency. To your point, portability, equally fantastic. So imagine you maybe secured yourself a few sats on any major exchange, Coinbase or otherwise. You've got some Satoshis, and they're sitting inside of Coinbase, right? Effectively a Bitcoin bank account to some extent, a Bitcoin wallet. The amazing part about Bitcoin is that you really can take it with you anywhere in the world. And this is perhaps too much of a tease, but there's a means of you accessing that wallet globally. You actually don't even necessarily need to have the internet to do so. As long as you understand the passwords or seed phrase for your wallet, you have access to that Bitcoin anywhere you go. You could go as far as to tattoo it on your leg and to know how to access it, kind of thing. But the reason that becomes kind of a larger piece is right now, you and I sitting in the United States, we've lived abroad. You've lived abroad many a times, but we've lived abroad together right when we got married, moved to New Zealand. And there was a whole process of taking our money, converting it into New Zealand dollars and like moving it abroad.
Yeah.
And we live in the first world, so I don't necessarily want to say that it was hard. It was cumbersome to do so. It took multiple days, if not weeks, to kind of do it. There's all of this like confusion between exchange rates and all those pieces,
timing,
what you're allowed to do. Yes, all those pieces. There's also, I think, a fair bit of fear in that process when you've never done it before. It's like, I hope our money ends up in New Zealand. We'll see how it goes.
From A to B.
But that's the nice part with Bitcoin, I think exclusively, is that it's a little bit easier to approach those topics if you're really thinking from a global application perspective.
Very cool. I think these are great teasers. We've got a lot to talk about.
I know.
Oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. So don't worry, we are going to talk about it.
Couple of other pieces. So I know we addressed scarcity from a 21 million Bitcoin cap.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about the juxtaposition to the printing, right? Like right now, like boom, if the Fed pushes the big money for printing as well.
I think that's smart.
So Bitcoin also has a supply issuance that is predictable and known. So
a supply issuance that's predictable and known. And issuance in another way is
how Bitcoin makes its way into the world.
Becomes available. Correct.
So there's no way to print more Bitcoin. You can't speed that process up. It's known. It's baked into the Bitcoin protocol. So again, without going into a lot of depth, comparatively, it is highly favorable to printing. Fixed issuance, or the supply issuance is fixed or predictable in that case. Other pieces that we will get into, because there are some bigger topics here. Decentralization. So we've talked about the Fed. We talked about 12 people that sit on a board and decide how much money makes its way into the world. Bitcoin itself is not owned or controlled by any one individual or institution. It is decentralized. And I'm sure some people probably furrowing their brow, and they're like, internet money, space money, I knew it, it's all a scheme, it's a Ponzi. Not the case. All decentralization refers to is where that Bitcoin protocol, that code is run so that Bitcoin can ultimately operate. That's referred to commonly as running a Bitcoin node. So you're running a copy of the Bitcoin ledger in a way. It's basically running it on a computer is all it requires. And the beauty in its decentralization is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of nodes exist in the world. And they're spread globally. So the power in that decentralization is it becomes very, very, very difficult to control, manipulate, take down, or influence Bitcoin in any way, shape, or form. It's sort of like imagine there are multiple redundancies that are built in.
Yeah, I like to picture it visually as like you picture the Earth. Everyone's seen those graphics with like the triangular grid that almost looks like
satellites.
Almost looks like the play thing we all climbed on as kids that has like the bunch of points and then the lines. If you have this network around the globe and each one of these dots is one of those nodes, if one of those nodes goes offline, you still have this gigantic network. I mean, I kind of like to think that versus, let's say, the Fed has 12 people.
See, I'm so glad we have the advent of ChatGPT so I'm going to correct myself. It's not hundreds of thousands. As of February 16th, 2025, the Bitcoin network comprises approximately 21,685 publicly reachable nodes. These nodes are distributed globally within the United States, hosting about 2,200 of them, about 10% in total. Germany hosting about 1,300 of them, about 6%. France, 500, about 2.46%.
It's so interesting that you're using ChatGPT as like a Google.
It's so fantastic. It also is
I haven't gotten
important here. It's important to note that these figures represent only the publicly accessible nodes. Many Bitcoin nodes operate privately, either behind firewalls or using privacy networks to make it difficult to detect and count. Even better in terms of that decentralization. So, again,
I think decentralization, this is like, I won't lie, eyes glazing a little. That's a big, important topic that really gets into the nuts and bolts of the Bitcoin pros.
I'm going to give you credit to something that you said during chapter 1,
Yeah.
which was looking at these topics, durability, portability, divisibility, all these things. And you said, as time has gone on, like, it's amazing because, like, it's almost like these qualities have been discovered over a period of time, and through their discovery, we've ended up with better and better and better money.
Yeah.
I think decentralization is one of those things. It wasn't on the initial
We haven't
list.
accomplished that yet.
Well, we haven't, especially
Until
with
now.
USD, because it's totally centralized.
Yeah.
The Fed controls it, right?
Yeah.
So it almost until this moment of, like, we were trusting that centralized authority to take good care of our overall fiscal strategy, and then they took off the handcuffs, and they're like, ha ha ha, like, right, didn't have to. We didn't know that decentralization was going to be such an important piece to it. And so that's kind of a new factor that we've uncovered.
Oh, that's cool.
In a way.
Like a discovery.
Last couple of things in terms of, again, Bitcoin being a better solution relative to inflation, is a trustless system. So because of how Bitcoin operates, there is no need for a Fed to govern any aspect of it. No centralized authority to manage its process.
Trustless system. Trustless is such a unique word, and I've said this before, because when you hear the word trustless, sometimes you could think lawless, and like trustless kind of
Right.
being like Wild West and have an interesting kind of chaotic notation.
More of a negative connotation than a positive one. Yeah.
But trustless meaning it does not require trust to be running at optimum level. I think that your your anecdotes about the Fed and you know, they're human beings. You have to trust a human being.
And boy, did that work out.
That hasn't gone great.
Yeah.
So trustless, meaning it does not require trust to work.
Correct.
It's not that you don't trust the system. So
No.
I
Also, that
think
trust,
that word's tricky.
it's that trust is not required for it to be successful. Like, to your exact
Yeah.
point, before 1971, right? It worked out. We
Yeah.
trust the Fed. We're like, woohoo, this is working out, right?
Yeah.
Trust, high five us, like, worked out. In this case, it's that has now in some ways worked against us. From a Fed perspective,
Yeah.
and now it's like, nope, trust is no longer a factor that
It's funny
that
you
is
said
requiring
factor.
its success.
When you said that, it was like almost like gold and it was like two-factor
Yeah,
authentic.
two-factor.
You know, like
Yeah.
now, and then we went back to, and that was like working, and everybody was like, this is great. Now I'm more secure. And then we went back to just basically like, my password is password.
Again, this is like, I don't know, 10% of some like high level Bitcoin pieces, but
Yeah.
especially around its scarcity and the fixed supply issuance.
Yeah.
Those two pieces in particular means that you cannot inflate Bitcoin. And in fact, whether these would be financial pundits or people like us interested in finance, you would say that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. It can't be inflated. So all the way back to episode 1, for those that are perhaps interested in where could I potentially store my money that isn't going to lose its value as a result of inflation,
Yeah.
that's where Bitcoin becomes a very interesting opportunity. And I think that's where we'll leave it.
I was just going to say, I think that's where we press pause.
Only hour and 30 minutes in.
90 minutes. I think because I'm starting to get, I imagine if I'm starting to feel a little fatigued,
Yes.
our audience is feeling a little fatigued.
Yep.
I think that's a great arc. Well done. I think you designed a beautiful arc of
Thanks.
what's good money.
We designed an arc. That was both of us.
What is good money? I hope you walk away with an idea of what good money is and how we got here. I hope you kind of, through recognizing what good money is, also being able to recognize that our money is broken. And when people are saying broken money, broken money, broken money, they're not just yelling it because they're pissed off or making shit up, but it's broken. And you can see the contrast between good, solid money and
Yep.
broken money. And now hopefully you understand when someone says broken money, what that means and why. And I think walking through the Fed, the debt spiral, and then, taking you down into the darkness, but then teasing you with the light, follow the light of now, we're starting to see a lot of times what I do appreciate about humans is that when things are broken and if they keep breaking, someone out there goes, I want to fix it.
Yes.
And other people start to recognize that it feels good to try and fix it. And hopefully we're part of that needle of moving towards the fixing as rather than focusing on the not fixing and moving towards fixing it. And here we have this new opportunity called Bitcoin that is a form of good money that may even be an evolved version of what we thought good money was before. So now we're entering into a new era, a dawn of a new
phase.
era that may be the best money invented, I guess is a weird word, but the best money designed so far. And I hope that you're starting to see how and why, and that it's not just a buzzword or people who are crazed about it or excited, but you can see now the evolution of how we got there and why this might be something that if it continues to gain momentum, if you fix the money, as Larry says, you fix the world. And as we see, money is integrated into everything and every day. So with broken money, shocker, a lot of things are broken. If the money starts to be fixed, which I finally kind of wrap my arms around why he says that. If the money starts to be fixed, perhaps in other areas of life, those things start to fix as well. And I think that's why Bitcoin also intrigues me. I always believe in the hero. I've always believed in the hero. I will always believe in the hero. And perhaps this is a version that brings a lot of heroes out of the woodwork and we see where it takes us. But I think that was a great explanation. Well done.
We did it.
My eyes
We did
not
episode
glaze
2
until the end.
You know what, too? Genuinely, for those of you that are still listening, 132 minutes in, or I'm sorry, hour 32 minutes in. I gotta tell you, it's so humbling and challenging to sit here because, good grief, these are really big topics. They're really important topics.
Yeah.
And I know I'm kind of speaking for both of us. The last thing we would ever want to do is dispel fiction as fact or say certain things. And that's why I feel like it's a learning process, even learning how to talk about this live because of how important the subject matter is.
I think that's why I got so nervous right when we started, because this being our first kind of educatory, as your dad would say, episode, we started to talk and I realized oh boy, am I more unprepared than I thought. And I think the reason why I felt that is I take that so seriously of having accountability to what we say, hold us to it.
But I look forward to getting better.
Yeah.
So what I'm learning, even this,
hopefully
even
it
that little
smoother.
bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think I
think that's a really good point.
It's getting down into part of why I'm so excited to do and keep having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
Is because every time, even though it's only been 2 times, I think even as we're prepping for it, I feel us getting a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better about talking about this and even thinking about ways to make it more approachable for others.
Yeah.
So that it's not going to shut people down and why it would be intriguing to them. So that to me is God, I'm already excited for the next episode to keep going.
Yeah. The other thing that I say to him before so far, every episode, the 2 episodes, but really even this episode, I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from you. We've learned a lot from each other. But you have this there's the cliche thing that kind of, I feel like a few years ago was like all about storytelling. Tell the story and your audience will be bazillion. You'll make $1 bajillion. It's all about the story. It's all about the story. If you don't have a story, you ain't got nothing. But what I so appreciate, and I love stories, but what I so appreciate about you is your metaphors, and they come from another place and they'll come out of your mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I get it. So I'm going to encourage him to use metaphors because I guarantee you that's how it's going to stick for a lot of you. I think you used a few today. That's one of my favorite things. And I think that's one of those things. It's like, we are so passionate about looking at this subject from a different perspective and multiple perspectives, but in a way that's creative. I don't want to lose the creativity because I think that's what's going to keep you here and learning and walking away and sharing, And so at the end of the day, it is about the story, but we're going to work on that. And I hope we've followed the outline that we set out in the beginning. Close.
Next time, I think we should
next
aim.
Episode?
It's like the third time people love threes. I feel like that's where we get truly into like how Bitcoin works.
Okay.
Like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
So that's the final teaser. We'll get into that. We'll even start there. No more policy stuff, any of those things like that. That'll be like a future episode, but I think we get into like Bitcoin
a true
itself.
Bitcoin
True
podcast.
BTC podcast. Yeah.
Okay. Until then, we will see you next time on episode 3, where we get into the actual inner workings of the mysterious fake money. It's not fake.
Until next time. Thanks for joining 2 Hearts 1 Bitcoin.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.